Hello and welcome back to goldstocktrades.com. Today we have a new and special guest with us, Trent Mell. Trent is CEO of First Cobalt. First Cobalt could be one of the first pure North American cobalt producers. Trent, thank you for being here with us today.
Jeb, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Appreciate you being here. I know it's a busy day for you. You've had some news, but before we get into today's significant news, if you could give us an update on the electric vehicle market and cobalt and sort of where you see us in the market cycle. I know demand is picking up rapidly for electric vehicles.
Yeah, it is. And you know, you've heard the expression of peak oil. We are quickly, and this is coming out of BlackRock of all places, we're quickly approaching peak ICE vehicle market. And by that I mean the transition from the traditional combustion engine towards electric vehicle is getting ready to hit a crescendo here in the next couple of years. And it puts the automotive companies, the car companies, in a tough spot, because at what point are you going to find yourself with an excess of vehicles that nobody wants to buy? And I think we're at a point now when some countries, not yet in America, but in some countries, you walk into a showroom and you have that conscious thought process of, do I want to wait a year and see what Audi and BMW and Volkswagen and the North American, the big three, are going to come out, or do I want to buy a nice vehicle now? Last year alone, China saw a 78% increase in electric vehicles year over year. And globally, the market's growing at about 60% a year on average over the last 5 years. And yet, we're only at a 2.2% penetration rate worldwide. And so this is like the iPhone. It's one of these things, hockey stick effect. We're getting real close. And despite what's been a challenging market for commodities, for cobalt, lithium, it's starting to come back. So I'm feeling, finally, after a tough year, feeling pretty upbeat about the future.
What is really important for us investors to understand is this secure supply of ethical North American cobalt supply. Cobalt's currently coming out of the DRC now. We've seen news child slave labor. There's the concern of Ebola as well. Maybe you can sort of highlight some of the concerns of just having our cobalt for our batteries coming from DRC and why some of the end users or manufacturers might want to have a secure, ethical North American cobalt supply.
Yeah, this is a topic that has caught our lawmakers' attention. The Senate Committee on Energy Security has been looking at this with respect to not just electric vehicles, but energy storage. You know, where are we going to get our cobalt and other critical minerals in the future? And cobalt, I keep saying it's the pinch point of the automotive supply chain because it's just not abundant. You know, cobalt, historically, we had enough out of our nickel mines and our copper mines as byproduct. But we are already at this early stage in an automotive revolution. We're already at a point where lithium-ion batteries account for more than half of annual global production. And that production, almost 70% of it now, is coming out of the Congo. And you've got, look, in the Northeast, you've got conflicts, you've got rebels crossing the country, you've got human trafficking and Ebola. But then you've got just the general malaise, the instability of the regime changes, new taxes. And the biggest miners in the world are having a hard time making a go of it there. The Chinese control a big portion of that supply chain, and they dominate the downstream, the refining into a final product. 80% of cobalt sulfate that we use in EVs comes out of China. And so you look at that supply chain, where do you go? And I'm proud that we are just about the only real American story out there. Our peer, eCobalt, has announced that they're going to sell themselves to an Aussie company, take a listing down there and head office down there. And we're holding true to our story of mined in America eventually, but in the meantime, refined in America and sold into American vehicles.
Well, let's discuss some recent news on First Cobalt, because I think that we could be possibly turning the corner here. We've recently announced you've recently closed a financing, and you've also produced battery-grade cobalt sulfate, which is used for lithium-ion batteries from the refinery. So if you could update us on these important news over the past couple of weeks, I'd really appreciate it.
Absolutely, yeah. So in the last year, I think with the fears of a China slowdown, of course, a strong U.S. dollar and just some malaise in the market, the cobalt price has come under some pressure. There's been some supply-demand imbalances as well that we're working our way through. But when you to get beyond that sort of headline, where are you going to go for your energy, and what makes for our national security? And by that I include even military applications for that. What makes us unique is this refinery that we have in Canada, and we're talking about 5-6 hours by road or even by rail into Michigan and into the U.S. market. And so I think our opportunity here is to restart that refinery. While the cobalt market is perhaps in a depressed price, the refinery margins are not impacted. Low cobalt means you pay less to buy your feed. And as we looked at our refinery and whether we would restart it and how that would look, it's fairly impermeable to the ups and downs of the cobalt market. And by that, I just mean good markets, bad markets. This refinery can make money. And so our strategy here is to become the first and only producer of refined cobalt for North America. And the results that we put out today it's more than a proof of concept. We basically took some material, third-party material out of the DRC, and we wanted to see if we could repurpose this refinery, which used different feeds and produced a different cobalt product, and basically make it an electric vehicle component, it's like a supply chain component for that market. And so we've got proof of that. I've got 4 different electric vehicle producers under NDA. We've got a couple of the big mining companies. We've got capital providers. All the pieces are there. But now, having demonstrated that indeed that flow sheet, that facility can work, now we need our partners. We've got to pick a mine. We've got to pick an auto company, and we've got to try to find our way down the aisle so that we can make that final decision that, yes, we're going back into production.
Well, let's talk about, I know for this refinery you got some of the DRC samples, but let's talk about your projects in Idaho, because you've also been drilling there, and it seems like you got a lot of cobalt there, and you might just be scratching the surface.
Yeah, you're bang on, Jeb. So historically, we've relied on the DRC for most of our cobalt, and that is not tenable for sort of geopolitical reasons. It's also not tenable just from a pure supply perspective. There's just not enough of it if you believe in the EV movement and energy storage. Idaho, geologically, Idaho is particularly unique, and not just in America but worldwide. There is only one mine in the world out in Morocco that is primarily producing cobalt with some other byproduct metals. Everywhere else, you're getting cobalt with another primary metal product. Idaho, in an area called the Idaho Cobalt Belt, has got a series of showings and historic works, which were maybe of less interest in an era where you didn't care about the cobalt as much, but it's really risen to the fore. And I think, looking forward, Idaho could be 5 or 10% of global production. And you've got a jurisdiction there, at least at the state level, where it's mining friendly. We got a lot of phosphate, a long history of silver mining, and our Idaho asset is particularly interesting because it doesn't have the arsenic issues that we've seen elsewhere in North America. And this is a deposit, we're drilling it. Every single drill hole we put into this deposit has hit mineralization and continues to grow. And I think it stands to become one of the more important cobalt plays outside of Africa as we continue our work.
Well, I know it's a busy day for you, Trent. Thanks for taking the time for us to explain today's important news and highlight First Cobalt, which is really critical company for the future of an ethical and American cobalt supply. It's one of the few companies that you can find that has quality cobalt assets right here in North America, and near-term cash flow from this refinery in possibly the next 1.5 to 2 years. Go get more information at firstcobalt.com. Trent, is there anything else you'd like to conclude with or you'd like to highlight before we sign off?
Well, I think, and you touched on it, I think the fact that we can be cash flowing in a relatively short period of time will make us masters of our own destiny and less reliant on the capital markets. And as we move forward with our refinery, we'll have the capital to advance our Idaho assets and to keep pursuing our America First strategy.
Thanks, Trent, for being here with us today.
Thank you, Jeff.